fight food waste. So my name is Stefan Simon, or Stefan Simon. So besides working on food waste, I also worked on some other projects while I was in Taiwan, which includes some workshops, for example, on upcycling and general environmental protection, and some presentations on food waste. And I also went to different schools in Taiwan to teach about food sharing and the problem of food waste. And I organized some small workshops, like, for example, a trash to treasure workshop, which was about upcycling cans and other material.
Hey, sorry for barring the report doesn't disappear.
Oh, it's disappeared?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. But good, you're telling me.
Yeah, that's.
Is it back?
Yes, back.
Yes.
Okay,
Great.
sorry. So again, today's topic, food waste, and my name is Stefan Simon. I'm from Germany, but I lived in Taiwan for about 5 years between 2015 and 2019. And during this time, I run different activities in Taiwan, like, for example, some workshops about upcycling and making, for example, natural toothpastes, or I gave some presentations mainly on the food waste topic, and I visited a lot of schools in Taiwan to give some lectures to the students. And another workshop which I mentioned before, which we called Trash to Treasure, where we used upcycling and we make some jewelry out of old cans and other materials. And also I hosted some other events for food sharing Taiwan in Taipei. And also for a while I had my own little space in Taipei, which we called the Green Salon, and we hosted some environmental friendly events there. And how a lot of often people in Taiwan ask me, how did I start to work on environmental topics, and especially how did I start to work on food waste? And I think I started because when I was younger, I encountered that currently our world is facing a lot of environmental problems and challenges. Like all of you probably heard about global climate change, and also deforestation, or also plastic trash problem, or another problem which is very present on Taiwan's west coast is air pollution, right? So when I was younger, I was asking myself, what's the world I want to live in, and what can I do about all these environmental problems? So what I think is very important is to observe the problems, try to get some information, and maybe also, as much as you can, try to act to fight these environmental problems. So for example, here's a photo of some young people in Germany who are protesting against fossil fuels and climate change. And that's me meeting some activists who are fighting for environmental change. And here's a photo on the right side, there are 2 photos of something that's called dumpster diving, which I will introduce to you in a moment. So what's dumpster diving? Actually, that dumpster diving is how I started to work on the food waste problem, because dumpster diving basically means to dump into the dumpster, to dive into the dumpster, when the dumpster is like a very big trash can. Like In Taiwan, normally you take out the trash and then the trash car comes and picks it up. But in Germany and in most other European countries, normally we have these big dumpsters. And for example, supermarkets, they throw all their food inside. And then what some young people would do is they would go there and check if some of the food inside the dumpster is still eatable. And it maybe sounds a little bit weird or even disgusting for some people, but actually you will find so much food that's still totally fine. And here's another photo of some people in the US, which are also dumpster diving in a really big container. And you can see that a lot of the food is even still packed because it was just discarded by the supermarkets. So here's another photo where you can see a person diving into a dumpster. And then here you can see some photos of the food which was just discarded and it's actually still packed. And very often it's not even expired. So what we did is we went there and we checked what food is still eatable and we try to save it from going to trash. And also you can see a lot of fruits are wasted. And for example, bananas, they have like a natural peel, right? So even they are disposed, normally when you take them home, you will peel them, so they are still totally fine to eat. And you can see some of the salad is still wrapped in plastic. So it's totally fine to still eat it. Just for different reasons, the supermarket throws it away. And we think it's such a big waste that we went there and tried to rescue it. And here I also show you some photos of food that's wasted. Like a lot of bread gets wasted. Normally, most customers, they will always want to buy fresh bread. So the bakery has to provide new bread every morning. So all the bread that they didn't sell, they will throw it away every night. So lots and lots of bread is wasted every day. And especially in Germany, a country that consumes so much bread, it's huge amounts of bread that's wasted every day. And here, this is a picture from Taiwan. That's actually a lot of food which also gets wasted because it's expired. Because a lot of drinks and other food have expiry dates, but even if it's over the expiry date, it doesn't mean that the food is not eatable anymore, right? It's just a date, and if you try it, smell it, and taste it, and it's still fine to eat, then we think it's still totally fine to eat it. So that's why we think it's a pity to throw it away just because the expiry date is overdue. So we always tell people, just share it or try it, don't waste it. And here's another photo of a lot of vegetables and fruits, like a lot of paprika, which all still look very well, and a lot of bananas, which maybe have some brown little dots, so they get all wasted because customers always like to buy the good-looking vegetables and fruits. And there's a term for it, which actually is called ugly fruits. So for example, you see the carrot doesn't look perfect, so a lot of people don't want to buy it. Or maybe the apple, you see here, it doesn't look like a perfect apple, or the potato doesn't look perfect. So a lot of them get discarded only because they don't look perfect. So we call them the ugly fruits, and they are still totally fine to eat. They taste as nice as any other fruits. They just don't look as nice. And another issue is like the packaging. Like for example, a can that is damaged from the outside, but the content is still totally fine, but a lot of times customers don't want to buy it, so the food gets discarded. And another example is packaging which is actually damaged. So maybe some of the content spoiled, some of the content fall out, but most of the content is still inside, so one could still use the content that's left, but most of the time they would just throw it away. And the last example is, for example, when you buy a big package with several fruits or vegetables inside, like in this case apples, and there's only one that looks not so nice anymore, they normally would throw away the whole package, which is also a pity. So maybe I give you a few seconds to think about, what do you think, how much food gets wasted every year in the world? If it's 1/4, 1/3, or a half. So you can think about it for 5 seconds. And then I will tell you that it's actually 1/3 of all food worldwide that gets wasted, which is 1.3 billion tons. And different kinds of food get wasted in different amounts. Like for example, for meat, it's about 20%. For fish, it's about 35%. And for fruits and vegetables, it's 40 to 50%. So like half of the vegetables and fruits that are harvested worldwide, they end up in trash. And for example, 35% of all fish that are catched, they also eventually end up in the landfill, end up in trash. And what's also very interesting to remember is, if we throw away food, we also waste all the resources that were needed to grow the food, right? Like we need an area of soil, we need energy, we need water to grow this fruits and vegetables. And then later we need energy to transport them, because a lot of food is transported all over the globe. Like for example, an apple is maybe grown and harvested in New Zealand by people, and then they fly it to a shop in Taiwan, and eventually, for some reasons, the customer in Taiwan doesn't buy it, so it lands on the landfill. So all the resources, all the transport, all the human power of harvesting and selling the apple, everything is just for waste. So I think that's really horrible. So I was thinking about ways to fight this food waste problem. And just to give you some numbers, for example, 25% of the world's fresh water supply is used to grow food that is never eaten. And these weeks, this summer in Germany, it's really, really dry. And as far as I know, in Taiwan, it's also very dry. So there would be better ways to use fresh water than just use it to grow food that afterwards it is wasted. And another example is, probably you heard about the global climate change and the greenhouse gas emissions. And if food waste would be a country, its CO2 footprint would be the third biggest in the world. Like China, they are a huge country, so obviously they are producing a lot of CO2, and the United States are also a big country which produce a lot of CO2, and global food waste is already at the third place. So if we would reduce food waste, we could also save a lot of CO2 emissions, which would be very important to fight global climate change. And another very, very important reason to reduce food waste is that worldwide about 1 billion people are undernourished, and a lot of people go hungry every day, while at other places in the world we are throwing away so much food. So it's actually really sad that at the same time we are throwing away so much food, a lot of people don't have enough to eat, which mainly happens in Africa and maybe some regions of South America, but also all over the world people are going hungry. So food waste is actually everybody's problem, because as well in industrialized but also in developing countries, people throwing away a lot of food. So it's not only a problem in Germany or in Taiwan. In every country of the world, people throw away food, even in Africa, for different reasons. So whenever I went to schools in Taiwan or I gave some lectures, I always used this example that each day enough food waste is produced only in Taiwan to fill 70 Taipei 101s. So I think all of you know the Taipei 101. So only in one day, only with the food waste, only in Taiwan of one single day, you could fill up to 70 Taipei 101s. So it's a huge amount of food waste that is produced every single day. And this is only for Taiwan, right? And also you might heard about the Sustainable Development Goals. And there are actually two goals which focus on food waste, which is number 2, zero hunger, which aims to reduce the hunger problem of people, and also number 12, which aims for responsible consumption and production. So even the United Nations, they are trying to work on food waste. And you might wonder, what are the governments currently doing? And some governments, they are already setting specific food loss and waste reduction targets. For example, they say this year we wasted this amount of food, and by 2025 we want to reduce it to half of it. But one of the problems is that currently there are very little measures, and also how can you measure how much food every different shop wastes, right? So that's something very difficult to report and to measure. And for the companies, the thing is, if they waste food, they are also wasting money and resources, right? Because when they produce food, they also have to pay for the resources, so they are also losing money. But the problem is, first of all, I think it's still quite easy for companies to waste food, because, for example, in Taiwan, they only have to pay for the trash bags, right? They don't have to pay a penalty if they throw away a lot of food. And also, there's no pressure for the companies to really report data on how much food they throw away, and they don't have to share it with the public. So as a customer, we don't really know how much food are different shops wasting. And the question is, what can governments and businesses do to reduce their food loss and waste problem? What could be ideas to help them to reduce their food waste? And the idea of food sharing is only one idea. There are, of course, many different ways, and all have their cons and pros. And food sharing is only one idea what could be done. So foodsharing.de, which is the German food sharing movement, started in Germany in 2012. And how does it work? So there are basically three parties. 三分合作. The first one is the food provider, which, for example, can be a supermarket like a 超市, or even a bakery, 面包店, or even like a 早餐店, like every place that provides food. And the second party is the so-called food saver, which is like a kind of volunteer. So a person that would go to the shop and pick up the food. And then later, the person can share the food with everyone, for example, with their friends, with their family. And in the following, I will explain how the system works. but for you, it's quite important to remember that there are three parties. So one is the provider, one is the food saver, and one is everyone, which can also be a so-called food sharer. And some of the advantages of this idea is that it can be organized online, right, through the internet. It's decentralized, like people can do it by themselves with their phone or with their computer. And also, it's suitable for small quantities of food. Like, for example, if there's a shop and they only have 5 bananas or 3 apples left, the food saver, the volunteers, can still go there. And they can even go there on short notice. For example, if you have the Zhao Zhan Dian and maybe you have some doujiang, like some soy milk, but for some reason your fridge is not working anymore, then normally maybe you have to throw away all the doujiang. But if you are part of the food sharing project, maybe some volunteers can come to your Zhao Zhan Dian and help you to save the doujiang from going to waste. So how does it work? The first step is, if you want to become part of food sharing and you want to become a food saver, you need to register as a volunteer, because the key idea of food sharing is that people, so-called volunteers, can pick up surplus food for free. Because before I showed you the idea of dumpster diving, right? Dumpster diving, it's like there's a shop, they have a lot of leftover food, which normally they would throw away, and some people would come there and pick it up. And the problem about this is that it's actually forbidden in Germany. Like, dumpster diving is something illegal. And it's illegal because the shops are afraid that maybe some of the dumpster divers, they get sick, and then later they will sue the shop. They will say, we got so sick from your food. Yeah, it's your responsibility. And by using this ID card, we are using a contract or a legal agreement between the shop and the volunteer. So if you say you want to become a food sharer, you have to sign a contract, and you basically say, all the food I pick up is on my own risk. If I get sick, it's my own responsibility. This gives the shop some security, that they don't have to be afraid that when they give away food for free and someone will get sick, they will be in trouble. So this is how the system works in Germany. And after you register, you will get access to an app. And on the food sharing app, you can see a map of the city where you live in. For example, this is a city where I lived in Germany. It's called Münster. And on the map, you see all the different brown little shops. So these are all the shops that are cooperating with food sharing, which allow volunteers to pick up food. So it's very simple that on a map you can see wherever there is free food to pick up, and then you can go there with your ID card and show them that you are a food sharer. And then here there's a picture on the top of a food sharer, like a volunteer, and a clerk from the shop, and they just exchange some food which otherwise would be wasted, right? And on the bottom picture, you can see some of the products. For example, some salad, some apples, a cucumber, and also some packed food. And the amazing thing about it is that if the volunteer wouldn't pick up the food, all of this would go to trash. So always keep in mind that all of this would normally go to trash. And also what's important, because some people think food sharing is a competition to the food banks, like SHU Inhang, but actually food sharing only takes the food that the food banks don't want to get. Like, for example, very small amounts of many different kinds of food. Normally the food banks, they don't want to pick it up. So that's when food sharing can support them to save these kinds of foods. And here are some other pictures from food sharing in Germany. So on the top picture, on the left side, you see two people who just come back from rescuing food from a supermarket. Then in the middle, you can also see a photo of food that was actually saved by me. And on the bottom picture on the left, you can see all the food that we saved during one single night from only one shop. And all this food would normally be wasted if we would not save it. And if you see this huge amounts of food, and you know this is only from one single shop in one night, then you can imagine how much food all the shops worldwide throw away every day, right? So huge amounts of food that's still totally fine to eat. And here I put some numbers of the amounts of food and the amounts of cooperating stores as well as volunteers in Germany. So far, food sharing in Germany already saved around 60 million kilograms of food. And all over Germany, there are more than 10,000 cooperating stores and more than 100,000 volunteers. So since 2012, food sharing in Germany has expanded a lot, and there are more and more cooperating stores and more volunteers who would like to join the program, because basically it's a win-win situation, because the shops they don't have to throw away so much food, and at the same time the volunteers they can basically get free food, and for the environment it's also nice because less food goes to waste. Okay, and in 2015 I moved from Germany to Taiwan, basically because I wanted to learn Mandarin in Taiwan, right? And because I did a lot of food sharing in Germany, I was just asking myself, if food sharing becomes so popular in Germany and works really well, why shouldn't it be possible to work in Taiwan? Because when I walked through Taipei during my first days in Taiwan, I found so many coffee shops and bakeries. Actually, before I didn't even know that Taiwanese people also like to drink coffee and eat bread. So I was very surprised. And when I saw all the bakeries, then I thought, if bakeries in Germany waste a lot of bread, then probably that's the same problem in Taiwan. So what I wanted to do is start something similar in Taiwan, which is basically called Food Sharing Taiwan, right? And as you can imagine, I didn't just have to restart everything from the scratch. I basically just tried to copy what I have been doing in Germany and try to implement it in Taiwan, right? I just used my experience from food sharing Germany to set up food sharing Taiwan. So because the most important element is the legal agreement, right? The contract between the shop and the volunteer. So I basically translated the contract from German into Mandarin, and then I had a lawyer in Taiwan help me to adjust it to the local law. And then I designed some food sharing IDs, right, for the volunteers. On the photo in the middle, you can see me with my German ID on the right side, and my food sharing Taiwan ID on the left side. And eventually, of course, I had to find a store to start with. So I just sent messages to a lot of shops or bakeries in Taiwan, told them about food sharing, and and asked them if they would be interested to join me. And from most of the shops, I didn't get any reply. A lot of bakeries, they replied me and they said they think it's nice. I contacted them, but they don't have interest to work with me. And eventually there was one German bakery who said they know the concept from Germany and they would be willing to try this in Taiwan. And on the right side, you see me in the middle, and there is a friend of me who helped me to set up food sharing. And on the left side, you see the baker of the Oma Ursel bakery in Taipei, who is actually also German. So in April 2016, we started to pick up bread from Oma Ursel bakery, which otherwise would also go to waste, right? Like on the left side, you see me with the baker who is German, and on the right side, you see me with the owner, the Lauban of the Oma Ursel bakery. And yeah, you can see some photos of the bread we would pick up every day. And also the volunteers, they would bring their own reusable containers to transport the bread. So because we didn't have an app like in Germany, in the beginning, we would just use Facebook. Like, for example, here you can see some volunteers. They are asking other people who can help me to pick up bread. And we would use a Google Calendar where people can write their names whenever they have time to pick up the bread. Because we would need one volunteer every day to go and pick up bread, which is actually a little bit challenging because people are very busy. So sometimes it's quite difficult to find someone to go and pick up the bread, but it's very important for us as well as for the bakery, so they can be sure that there will be a person every day to pick up the bread, because they have to rely on us. And after a few months, we found out that there's an initiative which is called Food Saving Worldwide. So what they are doing is they offer a free app, which is very similar to the German food sharing app, which everyone can use. And originally it was in English, but we helped them to translate it into Mandarin. So eventually, also people in Taiwan could use the app, and it was all in Mandarin, which I show you here. Because now you have a map which shows a map of Taiwan, and you see there's only one shop. Like, you remember the picture from the beginning from the German city of Münster, where you could see so many shops. And in this case, there is this one shop which was in Taipei, in Da'an in Da'an district, which was the Oma Ursel German bakery. So the app helped us a lot, so that people could just communicate through the app, like write some messages, and they could also book their time slot, so other people would know, okay, tomorrow, Badian Ban, this person is going. And the app was called Carrot. So people would get sign the contract, get their food sharing ID card, then they would register on the app, and eventually they would be ready to be a food saver. And here are some more photos of the bread we saved. Like, this is from each picture is from only one day, right? So you still have to remember, if we wouldn't save it, it would all go to trash. And here, just another scheme of the system, right? Like food sharing Taiwan, volunteers, shops, and Carrot. And at the right side, you also see the amount of zhigong, like volunteers, which was always between 28 and 46 people. And here there's a direct comparison between Food Sharing Taiwan, which was founded in 2016 in Taipei, and then also foodsharing.de, which is the German food sharing, which was founded in 2012. So the ideas are very similar, like the logos are slightly different. We decided to use the sweet potato in a Taiwan shape as a logo, right? And try to make everything look very nice to attract more volunteers. And then I told you before, there are 3 parties, right? The food savers are the people who pick up the bread. But sometimes there would be so much bread that they cannot just eat it by themselves, but they can just share it with their friends or with anyone. So how can you share the bread with other people, right? You cannot just talk to strangers on the street and tell them, hey, I just picked up some bread. Do you want it? So maybe you need to have some space where you can share it with others. So therefore, we use so-called public fridges, gonggong bingxiang, like a fridge we would set up in public. For example, in a coffee shop, which has very long opening hours, or maybe at a school or university. And then you can put food that you don't want anymore, you can put it inside. And then anyone who is interested can just go to the fridge and take it out. So there are some other photos of the fridges. Like, for example, sometimes there would be some events and people would have so many biendang left. So they can also just put them into the fridge, and whoever is interested into the food can just go there and take it out. And normally the fridges we set up, they were in coffee shops around Taipei and Da'an, Chu, but also in Taichung. And then definitely there needs to be some rules. For example, some food can just go bad too quickly, so you cannot put it into the fridge. Like, for example, meat, fish, eggs, milk. And then we always suggest people to pack the food and also put a tag on it, which says the date when it was put into the fridge. And also we want people to keep the fridge clean. So ideally, people need to help us to take care of the food and keep it clean. And there's no money involved. So we don't want people to take out food and then maybe sell it to someone. So there are different rules which we would always post on the fridges so everyone knows how to use them. And then there are also some other ways to share food. For example, there's this Facebook group which where people can also share food. Like, for example, on the right side, you see some examples. Maybe someone has a wedding party or birthday party and there would be some cake left or some other food left, and then they can just meet with people and exchange the food. So there are many different ways to exchange food with others. And besides picking up and sharing the food, what I think is super important is to do some educational work. Like, for example, on the first picture, we would do some waste cooking. Like, we would meet with a group of people and use the food that we collected to cook together and eat together. And on the right side, on the photo, we would attend some events, like cooking events. This one was called Food Revolution event, and we would make a quiz with people and make them aware of the problem of food waste. And on the left bottom part, it's me giving a talk about food waste. And on the right side, it's also me and another volunteer introducing food sharing to some young people and students in Taiwan. And I also went to a lot of schools to give lectures on food waste because I think that's super important. And still a lot of people don't know about the problem of food waste and that it's such a huge issue. And when we go to schools and we talk to younger students, we would always give them 5 simple tips, ideas how they can reduce food waste in their personal private life. For the example, the first one, 吃多少拿多少 means basically, for example, there are a lot of 自助餐, like a lot of buffet places in Taiwan. So maybe just add as much food as you can really eat on your plate. And if you're still hungry, you can go a second time, because that helps to reduce food waste. And if you have leftovers, then maybe share them with your friends, or maybe just take them at home. And eventually just try to get some information about local food waste and sharing initiatives, and try to make use of them. And probably because I'm a foreigner, someone from Germany who went to Taiwan to do this, of course also I got some media attention. So there were some newspapers who asked me to do interviews, or even some TV shows, or a radio channel who asked me to do some interviews. And I think it was a very nice chance to share about the problem of food waste, and also make people more aware of the problem. So also for me, it was a very new experience to give interview on radio or television. So especially as sometimes it was also in Chinese or in Mandarin. So it was a good way for me to practice my Mandarin. And actually, I'm nearly at the end of the presentation. So maybe we still have some time to answer questions. But first of all, if you are interested, you can visit the Collective Green page on Facebook, or also the Food Sharing Taiwan page. That's where we share some information on food sharing Taiwan. Unfortunately, since I'm in Germany now, I think food sharing Taiwan is not so active anymore. And you can also find Collective Green on Instagram, and you can also find my blog, which is called collectivegreen.de, and there are informations on different projects that I run while I was in Taiwan, but also which I'm currently running. And yeah, you are very welcome to have a look. And I think from my presentation, that's pretty much it. But I think we still have some minutes left for questions. So if you have some questions regarding my talk, or also regarding me and my life in Taiwan, you are very welcome to ask me. So I will just stop the presentation now, and then we can maybe talk a little bit if you guys want to in English, or I will try my best in Chinese. Okay.
想告诉大家，现在可以问那个自己想要问的问题，然后我们建中使节团会帮你们翻译。就是如果你真的不会英文的话。
May I ask? So there's only one location in Taipei for your project, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
okay.
After we started, for a while we had 2 bakeries, but as I mentioned before, it's actually a little bit difficult to maintain the pickups, because we have to go there to pick up every day. And I think compared to people in Germany, working hours in Taiwan are a bit longer. So
yes,
it's quite difficult for people to keep a tight schedule and go there to pick up food after their work. So eventually we are now only picking up from one bakery, but the idea was also to, like, all the material I showed, it's open source, right, on the blog. So people can also download it, and whenever they want, they can maybe try to find their own cooperations with stores.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well,
Thanks for your question.
Thanks.
May I ask a question?
Okay.
You have lived in Germany and Taiwan in the past, so I want to ask a question that do you think is there any differences that Taiwanese attitude to food sharing or food wasting and German attitude? Is there any differences between two countries?
Yeah, I also think maybe not really a problem, but something that I didn't consider in the beginning is because when I started food sharing, my experience was about food sharing in Germany, right? So I thought, okay, if this system works well in Germany, maybe I can just copy it and then run it in Taiwan. But actually, there are a lot of differences which maybe are not only because Germany and Taiwan are very different, but maybe also because this whole idea is very new in Taiwan. So, for example, one of the problems when in the beginning of food sharing is Taiwanese people felt quite uncomfortable to go to shops and ask for cooperation because for them it felt more like they are kind of begging for free food. And another issue was that some people they didn't really understand the difference between food sharing and the food banks. Like they were wondering why it's possible for some people like me who are actually able to buy their own food, why should they be able to get free food, right? So they didn't understand that the main idea of the food sharing is like more environmental protection, like reducing food waste, and not like welfare. And also I always emphasize, because one time there was an older lady, like a ai, she kind of blamed me that I'm like a rich person coming to Taiwan and I'm taking away food from the poor people. And I'm always trying to make very clear that we are only using the food which the food banks don't want to pick up. Like whenever there's food that food banks want to pick up and give it to the poor, of course we would give them priority. But some of the food, for example, some of the food I showed on the pictures, like very small amounts of only some bananas or apple, the food bank, they will not go there with their truck because normally they have a big storage somewhere outside of Taipei and they will not drive their truck into the city. And another issue is, I think in Germany there's a pretty big culture of volunteering, because also from my Taiwanese friends, I get the impression that they think in Germany the working hours are much less. Like you only work from 8 to 5, and in Taiwan some people it's quite common for them to work over hours. So it's very difficult for them to maintain a volunteering habit during the week. Like normally they are very tired after work and they maybe just want to, and it's also very easy for them to pick up some food on their way home. So instead of going to the public fridge or doing food sharing, they will just buy something on a night market on their way home, and then they are tired and they just want to go to bed. And in Germany, because we normally have shorter working hours, a lot of people still have free time to run some projects like food sharing. So that's some of the differences I encountered. And I'm also never saying that food sharing is the best way to reduce food waste or the only way. I think there are many ways, and the people need to find out which are the best ways for them.
But thanks for your precise explanation.
Yes, thank you. So if you also have other questions also regarding differences between Germany and Taiwan, also you are welcome.
I would like to know if there are any like memorable events or interesting things that happened when you first started food sharing Taiwan.
Okay, so there are actually a lot of memorable events. I think because when I started with food sharing, this was during the time when I studied Mandarin. So basically, in the morning I was taking Mandarin class, and in the evening or afternoon I was always very busy working on the food sharing idea because I felt super motivated to set up something similar in Taiwan. So and through this I also met so many Taiwanese people. Like when you are a foreigner coming to Taiwan and you are taking Mandarin class, I feel like a lot of my classmates, they would basically hang out with other international people. But for me, because I did food sharing and I met so many local people, it also really helped me with my Mandarin. And of course, doing the interviews, like getting so much attention from media, like from TV, radio, I never had this experience from Germany. So it was something really new for me to have such experiences in Taiwan. And of course, also a lot of people told me they think what I'm doing is really nice and it's really also something positive for Taiwan and something environmental friendly to reduce food waste. So that was very motivating for me. And what was also really nice, sometimes when I gave a lecture, like on different topics, like also I gave lectures on reducing plastic waste. Like sometimes some people would come to me and they say, "Oh, your lecture was super interesting. Tomorrow I will go and buy a reusable bottle." So I felt like even me as a person, I can do a slight change, right? Which is super amazing. Or even some schools, they said, "Oh yeah, after you gave a talk, we will also try to reduce our food waste." So I could tell even me as a normal person, I can make some impacts. Even the impacts are very small. This was something super amazing.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think also someone wrote something in the chat. In your effort of reducing food waste, do you ever encounter any hardship or anything made you feel frustrated? Actually, there was a lot of frustrating in the beginning when I started food sharing, because as I said before, it's a very unusual model and something for people who have who don't know this program. Of course, they first need to adjust to it. So in the beginning, it was harder than I expected to find volunteers and also make them go there every day on time, because we were, as food sharing, we want to make it as easy as possible for the shops to cooperate with us. So we would just tell them every day at 8 p.m. a volunteer will be there and pick up all your surplus food. And then the person also needs to be there on time, because the shops have to be able to rely on us. So in the beginning, a lot of people would just forget to get there, or maybe they would have to work overtime, so they didn't go. And every time the bakery, they would call me and would say, "Hey, you promised at 8 p.m. someone would be here. Why no one is there today?" And then I was really frustrated, because in the end I would have to go there. And I can also not go there every day. That was the idea why to find volunteers. But I think that's just something. Whenever you start something new, there will always be problems. And another problem which I also thought is quite, for me personally, was quite frustrating and a little bit sad, is that there were some Taiwanese people who said, "I'm a foreigner, I don't understand Taiwanese culture, what I'm doing is bad for the local food banks, I'm taking away food from the food banks." But this was just the minority, and the most people still liked the idea. So eventually I I just didn't care. I just continued with the project, and I listened to what they have to say, but eventually I decided the way I wanted to decide, and I still think the idea is good, but also I think it doesn't necessarily have to work the same way it works in Germany, because originally maybe the most frustrating part is that I hoped that when I provide all the material and also a lot of video footage or radio footage or newspaper footage, and people would know how to do it, maybe this would take off by itself. Like a lot of people would start their own food sharing. But this happened in Germany, but unfortunately never happened in Taiwan. But now I'm at the point where I think, okay, it's a bit frustrating, but it's okay. I mean, I did my best. I shared all the material, and if people want to access it, it's always online and people can access. So I'm not so frustrated about it anymore. And it's always been like a side project, right? I always did it in my free time, and it's not my full-time job, and I didn't earn money from it. It's just something I wanted to share with everyone. So no reason to be too sad. Oh, I don't know if you know about the bakery. It's called Oma Ursel Bakery. It's close to I think Taidian Dalu. I need to check, but it's called Oma Ursel. And if you are interested to become a volunteer, I can also get you in touch with the volunteers who are currently in Taipei. So don't go there by yourself and say, hey, I want to pick up free bread. Just maybe get in touch with me, because you guys have my email, and then I will get you in touch with the volunteers who pick up food there. Because this was also an issue, because the newspaper didn't really understand the idea. So they said, oh, everyone can get free mianbao at the Oma Ose bakery, and then a lot of people would go there and say, we want to get the free bread. Yeah, but that's not how it's working. So if you want to become a volunteer, you can always contact me, and I will get you in touch with the people in Taiwan.
Yes, may I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. I have a question is about do you or your team, like the food sharing team, have any plan in the future, like spreading the ideas to more cities or countries, like not only Germany and Taiwan, but also other countries, or just focus on these two countries and try to cover the ideas to the whole country?
So when I started with food sharing in 2016, we would have a little team, which like we called a core team or organization team, and then we would have a team of volunteers who would mainly like to pick up the bread. So I always needed some people who helped me organizing stuff, but the problem is that as this is all volunteer based, people would like to help, but only as long as their free time allows to help. So currently, eventually everyone gets busy with other projects and maybe their work, and I left Taiwan. So actually currently there's not really a team working on expanding food sharing anymore. There's only a team left of volunteers in Taiwan, which are still going to pick up bread from this bakery every day. But as I said before, I think what we are currently doing is we are featuring all the material on the website, and I think if you have a look, it hopefully is clear how the system works, and we offer you all the materials, so you could start your own cooperation with a bakery or any kind of food retailer. And what I'm trying to do is, if people are interested in inviting me to give a talk, like for example today or at some Taiwanese schools, I'm still happy to do this, but I'm currently not working on expanding food sharing anymore. Because I also think, besides picking up and sharing food, educating people is something super important. Because if people hear about food waste when they are very young, they also ideally later will just waste less food, which is the key of reducing food waste. So that's something I'm currently focusing on.
Okay, thank you for answering.
Yeah, you're welcome.
如果各位有想要提问的问题，都可以提问讲师，不一定要是建中使节团的同学。请问有吗？
What time? Until what time did you plan to have the lecture?
We plan to continue till 8:30, but we find out the time is a bit earlier, so we can end it up earlier. But if nobody have any questions.
I mean, I also just checked the results when I asked people for how much food is wasted, and I think most people guessed right that it's about 3分之一, like 1/3, which is, I mean, some people said a half, some people said 1/4, but most people guessed right. And also, I think, I'm not sure how you guys think, but this example that with the food wasted in Taiwan on one single day, you could fill 70 Taipei 101s, I think is pretty impressive, because it's a huge amount and it's only for Taiwan. And maybe if we have some minutes left, I can also just briefly, because I didn't really introduce myself. So, because often people ask me, why did I even decide to go to Taiwan? Because when I was a student in Germany in 2013, my focus was on atmospheric science and chemistry. And for my master thesis, I was actually doing research on fog, like clouds. And as a scientist, when we want to travel somewhere and do research on clouds, I think the most important is that there are actually clouds and fog, because maybe it's quite expensive for us to travel somewhere, and maybe if we travel to Japan for a month, there are some places where maybe there are simply no fog and no clouds for 4 weeks. So it would be like a waste of money and time to travel there. So what's very interesting about Taiwan as a location to do research on fog and clouds, it's that there are some areas where there's fog for about more than 300 days per year. So that's why we decided to go to Nantou, because they have like a cloud forest, and at the same time there is a decent amount of air pollutants from the western part of Taiwan, like Taichung, Chiayi, and this area. So actually going to Nantou was very interesting for us to do research on the air pollution situation in clouds. That's why I went to Taiwan for the first time in 2013, and 2014 I go to Taiwan again to do research on Jinmen Island, and simply because I liked it in Taiwan, I applied for a scholarship from the Taiwanese government, which invites foreigners to go to Taiwan to learn Mandarin. So that's why I got this scholarship to learn Mandarin, and I decided to visit the Mandarin school of NTU, Taida, and that's how I ended up studying Mandarin at NTU, and afterwards I was offered a job as an research assistant, Yanzhou Zhuli, at NTU. So I stayed there for about 6 months, and then I changed to work as a research assistant at Zhongyuan Yuan. So I worked also in Zhongyuan Yuan for more than 2 years. And yeah, so all the stuff on food sharing I did in my free time. So that's just to my personal background. And now, for now, I'm back in Germany for work reasons, because my background is environmental science, and I didn't really find a job in Taiwan. So that's why in 2019, just before COVID started, I decided to move back to Germany to work here. And unfortunately, since then, I could not come back to Taiwan because the borders are still closed for foreigners. So eventually, when COVID is over and the borders are open again, I can also visit Taiwan again, or maybe even move back. I don't know yet.
So is there some professors in Taiwan also major in studying fogs or clouds in Taiwan, or air pollutions?
Yes, there are actually some people at the Taida Dachi Kirchhöhe, like atmospheric science. There are some people working on air pollution, and also at the Academia Sinica, they have a air quality center. Like they have a whole center which focuses on air pollution.
Okay.
And that's where I worked.
Yeah, mostly some environmental studies in Taiwan I've heard about, mostly study about air pollution, but I haven't ever heard before of someone learning fog in Taiwan. Yes. So I think that's really interesting to hear about that. Thank you.
It's actually a very small community. Like even in the whole world, there are only few people, but because Taiwan has a very high mountain range, and also is an island, and also has a decent amount of air pollutants, is a very interesting area to conduct fog research.
Okay, thank you.
There are 2 more questions. Okay, there are some more questions. Maybe one is there's one from Chidian Sancheban, and it's Zai Taiwan song. Maybe someone can help me to translate. Taiwan.
The translation is below the question.
Okay. Is there anything that impressed you while working in Taiwan? This one?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, first of all, I think Taiwan itself as a country is super impressive for me because just because of the nature, like it features such a heterogeneous nature, like from the north with its very big urban area of Taipei, and also the west coast, even with a lot of urban area until Taichung and Kaohsiung. And at the same time, the east coast is very a very rural area, and also all these mountains, right? Like after I moved to Taiwan, I really got into hiking. So I have been to some of the higher mountains of Taiwan, like Xueshan and Yushan, and it's super beautiful. And also, it's really nice to have the sea nearby and also the mountains, right? I think there are very few countries where from Taipei you can be in you can be in super high mountains within 2 or 3 hours, but you can also be at the seaside within 1 or 2 hours. So that's something which really impressed me, and also of course the food. Like I'm very open to try a lot of different food. So I think I tried a lot of food in Taiwan, and I'm also not afraid of trying stuff like chow tofu, or I even really like it. And also there are a lot of simple food which I really like, and I basically had it every day, like fantuan, for example, or Jeonju naicha, like some very local food, which I also really enjoyed. And what else impressed me? Maybe some things which I think are working better in Taiwan than in Germany is, for example, the internet. Like even Germany, most people think of Germany as a very developed country. My Taiwanese friends are always surprised that the internet here can be quite slow, and also the public transport here sometimes is a little bit troublesome. Like very often trains are delayed, and also not as fast as the Gautier in Taiwan. Like using the high-speed train is very convenient, and also using local transport like MRT or even buses and trains are also super handy and cheap in Taiwan. So that's something I really liked about Taiwan, and something I still miss. And then the next one, is this job your career, or you just yeah, that's actually a very good question, and also something I encountered in Taiwan. I mean, when I start a project, right, the first thing I do is I use the internet to see if there's already someone doing something similar, and then I would try to get in touch with the people, because I realized that in Taiwan there are already, when I started food sharing, I realized there were already so many really nice initiatives working on food waste, and they would also provide a lot of very nice material, and everything on their social media looked super nice. But when I reached out to the people, many times I got the reply that they are actually students, and it was just their university club or project, and after they graduated they didn't continue working on the project. So that's why I think sometimes it's a pity when people start this, and then maybe they do something super nice and they get some funding for it, and then they don't get to the point where the project is somehow sustainable, so it can even keep going without the public funding. And originally that was my idea, to try to make food sharing to maintain even after I leave Taiwan, which I basically also somehow failed, because I mean, it's still ongoing, but it's not really expanding. But yeah, so it's working on food sharing has never been my career. It's always something that I did in my free time as a volunteer. And also the core idea of food sharing is that it's run by volunteers in their free time, because that's how it works in Germany. And if people are willing to invest their free time to run it, then there is not such a high need for financial support, right? And there's no danger that when the money runs out, also the project ends. At least that's the idea. And yeah, it's more like a public service activity after work. And I also agree that that's, for many projects, that's a very big problem, because they are dependent on financial support. And as soon as the financial support, for example, from the government stops, also the projects are stopping. And that's also actually something very interesting, or like a difference between Germany and Taiwan. Because when I started food sharing in Taiwan, and I said, oh, it's just a public service project which people do in their free time, a lot of people, they for them, this idea was quite weird. I mean, they told me they don't think that food sharing can sustain only based on volunteers. So they told me, I have to decide, either I'm a startup, so I have to think about how can I make food sharing into a startup and earn money from it, or I'm a welfare organization like a food bank, so I get financial support from the government. So for them, the idea to run a project just by volunteers without any money was very unrealistic and not very not supposed to work. While I came from Germany and I had this experience that it can actually work. So that's also a pretty big difference. And I even because maybe out of curiosity, I tried to remodel food sharing into a kind of startup. And I also went to some startup events and I pitched the idea. And I also think I got some nice feedback, because the topic of food waste was quite popular at this time. And also I visited a lot of food banks in Taiwan and talked to them. But eventually, personally, I think the nicest way would be if food sharing could still be volunteer based and work similar to how it works in Germany, even though I know it's quite difficult, and also the way it works now shows me that it's hard to maintain such a program if it's only volunteer based. But I still think the best way, of course, is to try to run a project and in a sustainable way and try to make sure it can maintain itself. If it's always dependent on subsidies or financial support from the Taiwanese government, I think is quite challenging. Also because from my experience, the Taiwanese government sometimes is not very sustainable with its financial support. Like, for example, when I started to work in Taiwan, the government provided some money to hire new assistants to work on environmental problems. But later, topics like blockchain and AI became very popular. And I heard that the government decided to shift some of the money they originally used for environmental protection, just shifted to AI and blockchain. So yeah, that's maybe something else that I sometimes feel a little bit challenging about Taiwan and working with the government, because sometimes I feel like it's difficult to maintain a clear and long-term strategy. Is the concept of food sharing similar to a lifestyle called veganism? If so, what's the difference? Okay, that's also a nice question, because also a lot of people ask me about this in Taiwan, and also this term freeganism I also for the first time encountered in Taiwan, because there were like a lot of free markets where people would also invite me to go. And I think people who are interested in freeganism, or who live this concept of freeganism, for them food sharing can also definitely be interesting and be part of their lifestyle. But I think as a person who is a freegan, it's not only about food, it's about all parts of life, which ideally are as free as possible. But for food sharing, right, it only focuses on food. There was another project which I initiated, which I called a share box, which is very similar to a free market and also very similar to the public fridge. Like, the idea is to have some shelves all over the city, and whenever people have something they don't need anymore, they can just put it into the shelf. Like, for example, now in Germany there are a lot of like public libraries, which are shelves, for example, also like old fridges, like bookshelves, and then people, when they've finished reading a book, they can just put it into the shelf, and then other people can take it home and read it. And the idea of the share box is, if you have something, for example, I don't know, clothes, or maybe some cooking stuff, something you don't need anymore, you can put it into the shelf, and then other people who can use it, they can just go there and pick it up for free. So I think that's some concepts who can be linked to freeganism, but freeganism probably also has many other concepts, because there also needs to be space for living, and besides eating and clothing, there are probably many other components which are part of the freeganism lifestyle.
还有任何人有问题想要问讲师的吗？
你问我猜字。
No, I'm just asking if there's any question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. If I have questions, okay. Maybe because someone mentioned freeganism, I feel like when I'm wondering if you, because you guys are young people, if you feel like such ideas of food sharing and freeganism, if they are becoming more popular during your generation, or if this is something maybe already people in Taiwan 20 years ago were thinking about. Because I could imagine that maybe 20 years ago, such ideas like food sharing and freeganism were not very popular within the Taiwanese society. Or do you think there is some change regarding these ideas, or you think that this has always been there, or you think it's something new that can develop in Taiwan, or what's your opinion about this?
I've heard of this phrase about freeganism from a video online, and when I first heard about the food sharing, I thought this is very has a similarity between them, because these two concepts, they both collect food, which maybe the shops or the supermarkets, they are going to throw away, and they instead make use of them. So That's why I think about this question. Thank you.
And do you guys generally think some ideas like food sharing can work in Taiwan and maybe become more popular in the future, or you guys think that's probably not going to work?
Yes, about this question, I think it's possible to do such things in Taiwan because, I mean, people now like to learn new things. I mean, try new things. Like they're not that old school. They won't restrict themselves. Like they are able to try new things. But I think the most important is to change some people's thoughts or something, like to tell them that this kind of work, the food sharing things are good, are great, are nice to the environment, and not just like the things you told us before. Like I think the main point is to change their mind, I guess.
Maybe do you guys think you already in your personal private life you already pay attention to issues like food waste or maybe in generally waste of resources? Do you guys have some ideas or examples, something that you think you do, or you think you should do?
Well, from my perspective, I think friends around me don't have the serious problem of food wasting because we've got good at education and we know the correct informations, and we won't waste food like that. Like maybe put some still eatable food and into the trash can or discard it immediately after purchasing. So, but actually, I know there's a lot of people in Taiwan who might waste food. Like they may go to the restaurant and order a lot of foods and just maybe eat kind of one of maybe like kind of eat 20% of them and 80% were left. So I think it's a big problem in Taiwan, but I can't do much in my real life. So maybe I can get some advices or suggest from you how to improve the situation and condition. Yes.
And do you think in your educational system, like in school, environmental problems are already addressed? Or do you think in Taiwan you learn about it, or you think you wish you would learn more about it?
I think these informations were mostly gained from parents, how they teach their kids. But in school, there are not much classes like this to import images for students. Yes, so maybe this is kind of a problem in Taiwan. Yes.
Because from my experience, when I was invited to schools, I think schools were always super happy to have someone to talk about these issues, and also I think the children also seemed to enjoy it. Maybe probably also they were just curious that there's a foreigner coming to their school and giving a lecture, maybe even sometimes in Mandarin. But I'm also wondering if maybe there's a need in Taiwan for more such educational activities. I mean, they are probably everywhere around the world. Even in Germany, there's a need.
Yes, there's still a lot of progress to go on. Thank you.
All right. If there's no more question, I think it's the end of this process. 如果没有任何的，就是没有更多问题的话，那我们今天的讲座就大概到这边。然后如果后来有想到更多问题想要问的话，都可以传给我们，就是我们可以帮你转达讲师。然后如果想要索取录影连接，也可以私讯我们。然后今天很感谢Steven Simon 讲师来为我们介绍这个如何去回收剩食，还有这个 food sharing 的这个概念。那相信大家也学到了很多。那如果能够身体力行去把这样子的概念和理念传承出去，身体力行的话，相信对我们台湾的环境保育和这个剩食浪费的状况都会改善很多。好，那现在请大家都把镜头打开，然后我们拍一张大合照。
Also, I just shared my email， 所以如果有人以后还有问题，也可以跟我联络，用我的 email。
OK， 好，大家都打开镜头了吗？好，3、2、1 ，nice。好，谢谢大家今天的参与，谢谢。
好，
Okay，
谢谢。
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Seaman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Simon, I think we owe you apologize, and we are sorry that you didn't get the link until a minute before this lecture started. And this is our mistake, and we sincerely apologize to you. And we are very sorry to cause you trouble. Hope that we can have another opportunity to cooperation again. We are sorry about that.
No problem.
Yes.
没有问题。
Sorry.
Thank you.
OK，
再见。
Thank you.
再见，
拜拜。
谢谢。
拜拜。
拜拜。
再贴一次签到宝宝，没有问题。哦，好 ，OK， 好，大家再见。